Howdy, 8th grade. Today we are going to be talking about simplifying expressions there we go, using the greatest common factor. So I know we talked in class a little bit about finding greatest common factor. I want to do a quick review of what that is. So greatest common factor, first we want to find the factor. Anytime we're doing factors, it's nice to use a factor tree. So if I am doing, let's say, the numbers of 120 and 150, and I want to find their greatest common factors, what I'm going to do, I'm going to start by making factor trees. Anytime there's factors, I want to do factor trees. 120 is going to break down into 3 and 40, that's 2 and 20, that's 2 and 10, and that is 2 and 5. 150 would be, let's see, that's 2 and 75. 75 is 3 and 25, like 3/4. 25 is 5 and 5, and we're good to go. So 120, do that over here. 120 becomes 3 times 2 times 2 times 2 times 5, and 150 becomes 2 times 3 times 5 times 5. So what I'm going to ask myself is, what do these numbers have in common? Well, they both have a 2, they both have a 3, and they both have a 5. So if they have in common, that's that C part of greatest common factor. What do they have in common? And then I want the biggest number I can make from these. And the biggest number I can make from these is by multiplying them together. So I'm going to do 3 times 2 times 5, which is 30. And that right there is going to be my greatest common factor. We can do this same thing with polynomials. So I want us to try finding the greatest common factor of, and I'm going to have two fairly big things here. I'm going to have 6a squared b cubed and 8a squared b squared c. So when I split this up, I'm going to do this side in blue. 6 and a squared b cubed. 6 becomes 3 and 2. A squared b cubed becomes a squared and b cubed. A squared is going to be 2a's, and b cubed is going to be 3b's. I'll do the other side in pink. Start off by doing the, oh goodness, the c should be down on the ground. There it is. And back to pink. I'm going to have an 8 on one side. On the other side I have my a squared b squared c. 8 splits into 4 and 2. 4 is 2 and 2. A squared b squared c is going to split into 3 things. Got my a squared, my b squared, and my c. A squared is a times a, b squared is b times b, and c is just c, so it's just going to stay there. Now I need to find what these have in common. Let's do that in yellow. So, looking at the bottom of the trees, I see that they both have a 2. They both have 2 a's, and they both have 2 b's. So the greatest common factor of that would be 2 times a times a times b times b. A times a is kind of a mouthful, so we're going to do 2a squared b squared. So I just changed my a times a to a squared, b times b to b squared. I want to try one other one. This time we're going to do something a little bit fancy with it though. So we're going to do what's called factoring, and this is where it gets weird. So we are going to try to factor 9x to the 4th y squared minus 9x to the 6th y. So when I first off take a factor tree of this, then I'm going to do what's called factoring in a second. But I have to start off with a factor tree so I can find my greatest common factor. The word factor is going to happen a lot this episode. We're going to have 9 and x to the 4th y squared. 9 is 3 and 3. X to the 4th y squared is x to the 4th and y squared. And my x to the fourth is going to be 4 x's. My y squared is going to be 2 y's. Over here I'm going to have 9 x to the 6y. 9 is 3 and 3. X to the 6y is going to be x to the 6 and y, and x to the 6 is going to be x, 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 and x. So, to find the greatest common factor, I just circle what they all have in common. So both of them have 1, 2, 3's. They both have 1, 2, 3, 4 x's. And they both have 1 y. So my greatest common factor is going to be 3 times 3 times x times x times x times x times y, which I can rewrite as 9 times x to the fourth times y. So what I can actually do to factor, I can remove these from the other two, from each term of the equation. So I'm going to take the 9x to the fourth y out, and I'm just going to write it out front. So that's going to go 9x to the fourth y, and then I'm going to put what's left in parentheses. What's left goes in here. This goes right out here. What I mean by what's left is we used up everything we just circled up here. So there's no more of these 3's, there's no more of these x's, there's no more of this y. These 3's are gone, these x's are gone, this y is gone. So all that's left is this y and these 2 x's. So I'm going to write my y here, because my y is all that's left for my first term. This whole term now became that y. Don't write that, that'll get really weird on a piece of paper. And this whole term just became those 2 x's, because I took out everything else. So I have a minus sign up here. I'm going to keep my minus sign. And then what's left of this term, like I said, is just the 2 x's we did not use for the greatest common factor. 2 x's is going to be x squared, and just like that, we are done. So instead of writing this whole thing up top, this one right here, we can factor it by removing the greatest common factor from each, and now it looks like a distributive property problem, but instead we wrote our greatest common factor up front and what's left in the middle. Just like that, we're good to go. So that's all I'm going to talk about in the video tonight. For the lesson practice, if it says to factor each expression completely, make sure you do that on top and on bottom of the fraction. I think y'all can figure it out. I believe in you. This is going to be one of the harder lesson practices. We're going to do A through I, and y'all are going to do great. So I will see y'all in class tomorrow. Toodaloo.